No, Ebonics and slang are not the same thing. They are not equal terms. They are not synonyms. You got to know this. You got to know that in 1973, that there were a group of black scholars who did not like the negative connotations of terms that were used to describe the language of black people who spoke Ebonics. Those language terms that were being used to refer to the language that was so negative were things like non-standard Negro English, or even nigger English in some instances. Those were terms that were not dignified, they weren't respectful. So this group of black scholars came up with the term Ebonics, which literally means black speech. Ebony meaning black, and phonics having to do with speech. It actually means black speech. And it was a term that was used to give dignity to the language system that many black people in urban and rural areas spoke. So, today, however, when you hear the term Ebonics, usually people are using it in a way to refer to something as being ghetto, or as something as being lower class or lower caste, or even something that is what we would call ratchet. And really, we need to reclaim this term because it was not given to us to be used in a negative connotation. And ironically, it has become the very thing that it was meant to overcome. It was given to us, black people, by these black scholars as a term of dignity and respect for the language system that was spoken and is spoken by the descendants of African enslaved people. So, Ebonics is that. Now, what is slang? I know that there are some people who try to equate slang with Ebonics, and they are not the same thing. Please remember that slang is more of a temporary language system. It is something that you hear a lot of young people, or younger people, excuse me, describing things. It's their form of vocabulary that they use to describe things, but it's subject to rapid change. It's, like I said, very temporary, and in many cases it can cross over to other ethnic groups, and it is representative of young culture. That is not the same thing as African American vernacular English, which is, despite whatever one's age is shared across all age groups, and it is the link between black people of uh, descendants of enslaved African people, that no matter where you are, you share similar linguistic features and grammatical features in a language that has specific rules and regulations. So let's stop the idea and stop contributing to the conversation that Ebonics and slang are the same thing, because they are not. Let's also stop contributing to the myth that Ebonics is not a language system. That would be a mistake. You know, a lot of people look at Ebonics as the language of people who are lazy or unintelligent, uneducated, just careless in their speech, just as a lazy type of speech where you could just say whatever you want, and that's just simply not the case. Again, Ebonics is a regular, rule governed, and systemic type of language. It has specific linguistic features so that no matter where you are, whether you're in a rural area or in an urban center where you will find the people who speak Ebonics in those areas, you will share some of the same features. You will use subject verb agreement, for example, in the same way. You will use, for example, the word ain't, AINT, in the same way, whether you are in North Carolina or if you're in Ohio, because of this system of language that was given to us from our enslaved ancestors who had to come into this country, and they had to learn the language because they were unable to use their own. And they developed Pidgin English that included the English that they were picking up from the slave masters and the workers amongst the plantation who were white, along with some of their own African languages that came up with this language that has evolved over time, as all languages do, into what we speak today and what is known as Ebonics. Now, Ebonics is also referred to as African American Vernacular English, and you may hear me refer to that in different videos. It's also called African American English or even Black English, but it all means the same thing. But let's please stop contributing to this conversation that Ebonics is this lazy language system that's substandard, that's incorrect. This is just anything goes. You can say whatever you want. And let's stop adding to the conversation that slang and Ebonics are the same thing. They are two completely different things. Again, slang being a temporary language system, or not even a system, excuse me, language infusion of words that many young people create amongst themselves, and that those things are transferable to different age groups. For example, you've heard the word lit. I actually saw that in an advertisement for cosmetics, and there were the advertising was saying this cell is lit. That would be an example of slang. But if you hear me say I ain't driving no car, well, that would be an example of Ebonics or African American Vernacular English, where the double negative is completely acceptable in African American Vernacular English, but is strongly stigmatized and looked down upon in so-called standard English. So those things are not the same. Please, let's make sure that we are using terms correctly and that we are presenting the correct information ourselves. Because if we have to represent ourselves, we have to represent ourselves correctly. So please know and understand the distinction between Ebonics or African American Vernacular English and slang. They are not the same thing. Thank you so much for listening. Please join me again next time. Like, share, subscribe, and as always, peace to you and yours.